Hey, Sugar, are you hungry again? If I'm married to this place like I am breathing oxygen, this is what I am. Most everybody that I talk to anyway around here feels like their days are numbered. When I'm finished, I guess it'll just be done.
Welcome everybody to another episode of Local Film Talk. I'm your host, Bob Walters. I'm here with, of course, my co-host, Conrad Arnold.
Hey, how's it going?
We've had a pretty busy week. Tell everybody real quickly about that workshop we went to, the lighting workshop on Thursday. That was pretty cool.
That's right. This past Thursday, we had a digital cinema workshop with Ammon Erisman and Trip Green over at Blue Forest Studios. Advanced interview lighting techniques. It was pretty cool. 2 hours, solid pack. Those guys know what they're talking about, and it was just quick. It was awesome. It was good.
I went there too, and that was kind of my inspiration for anybody who's been paying attention, watching the past couple episodes. They could tell my lighting setup has gotten a lot more sophisticated. I got some lights back here. I got the key and the fill light and everything, and all that is stuff that I went to this workshop, and I came home and I said, I'm doing it wrong. I got to do this shit right. So I moved some lamps around and everything, and it's looking a lot better. So that was pretty cool. That was a free workshop, and they're hoping to start up a whole series. So we'll have to get them on here to talk about that if that comes through.
Yes.
So we're here tonight talking to Ted Richardson and Jason Arthurs, the co-directors of a short documentary called The Last Barn Dance about a local dairy farmer here in North Carolina. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So let's start with, you guys can decide who can field the question, but let's start with how did you pick this subject? How did you find your subject, the dairy farmer Ted, and about how long ago was that?
You want to take this, Ted?
Sure. I met Randy Lewis more than 12 years ago. I was a photographer at the Winston-Salem newspaper, and I got an assignment to go out to Randy's farm in Alamance County to photograph the band that plays for the barn dances, and had such a good time at that assignment. I came back a couple years in a row just as a participant at the dance, and got to know Randy, and he mentioned to me that they didn't have any photos or video of the dance. He was concerned that it might not be around for much longer, and asked me if I would just photograph the dance. I did that for a couple years and started to film scenes of the dance, just mainly for Randy. He was going to get all the footage just for himself, and I became interested in a story that was a little bit beyond just the dance, and also invited some of my talented friends in to help me shoot the next dance and the next one, and the more we got into it, the more it looked like it could be a film.
So like you were actually like just the event of the barn dance, which I guess is an annual thing he does. You guys were almost like producing a concert video every year.
Yeah, with it was getting a little bit more sophisticated each year. I think the equipment got better, and I became a little bit more knowledgeable about how the farm was doing and sort of how the dance fits into the bigger picture.
Okay. So how did you, I guess, how did you come across, like, once you start talking to
Randy?
Randy. I kept trying to say Jerry. I'm terrible with names tonight. When you started talking to Randy about his story, how did you, like, I assume you started looking into the whole dairy industry in general, and what kind of stuff did you figure out there, and how his story played into the whole scene?
Well, I'll just mention really quick that Jason came on board pretty early in the process. He had just finished his first film, And I think if it weren't for Jason, all that footage would probably still be sitting on a dusty drive somewhere and would not be a movie at this point. But Jason came in with a lot of energy, and part of what Jason did is he did research some of the milk industry, just to kind of see the lay of the land. We didn't include that stuff so much in the film, but it was good to know what was going on. And Jason, you might have a couple things that you learned that you want to share.
Yeah, I would say more than anything, we weren't necessarily focused on the dairy industry. In fact, I learned a lot more just from spending so much time with Randy after the film than I even did while we were making it. I think that Randy, we just kind of always viewed it more so as about Randy's character and his personality and the culture and the community around the farm than necessarily the farm itself. It's kind of a backwards approach because I think most people would go into it with kind of an agenda on, showing certain aspects or certain features or whatever of the dairy industry, but we went into it very much focusing on Randy as a person in that community, and we just learned about the farm kind of as we went.
I mean, the documentary does focus a lot on the day-to-day life of, the farm, which, I thought was pretty cool. There's a lot of little asides and stuff, little side stories, short side jags about stuff that happens on the farm, whether or just stuff that's happening in Randy's life, and whether it's, something that's probably pretty normal, like, having to put down a cow, or a cow getting its head stuck in the fence. I'm sure that kind of stuff happens pretty regularly. But then there's also some odder stuff, like the Hindu house blessing ceremony that he got to participate in. And it was, again, it was kind of cool to see that the documentary was just kind of focused on the stuff that happens in Randy's life rather than a diatribe against the dairy industry.
Yeah, I think part of what was interesting with what unfolded in the film is that Randy fits some stereotypes, but he avoids most others. I mean, he's a pretty creative, pretty forward-thinking guy. When I first met him, he said that he was the oldest 50-year-old that I'd ever meet because he sort of leaned backwards toward, like, he's a World War II buff. He knows a lot of older people at his church. He says he connects more with the older generations. But he's very progressive, too, and so the whole scene with the Hindu home blessing did not surprise me. He told me that they actually hosted one of the first, weddings for a gay couple in rural Alamance County out at their farm. They have a lot of friends from different places that come out to the farm, so he's very progressive, open-minded. He's very modern in his thinking and his behavior, but he's got both. He's got a good hold on traditions, but he's also got a good mind for the future. So that makes him an interesting character.
Right.
He seems like a cool guy.
Yeah.
And he's a great character, a great subject for a documentary.
And he's funny. I mean, he's full of one-liners. I mean, he cracks me up every time I talk to him, and I hear new stuff. He doesn't say the same stuff over and over. It's usually something else. It has me rolling.
He's a good character. And another thing about Randy, he's really interested in the filmmaking process, and he would ask us questions. He would notice when we brought different cameras or different crew. He wanted to know why we were doing things. It wasn't one of these fly on the wall type scenarios at all with Randy. His personality is so in your face. You can't hide behind the camera with Randy. And I think that at least I tried to do that some, and now that the cameras aren't in the equation, I've gotten actually to know Randy much, much more, just because I've spent so much more time with him, not trying to make that disconnect between him and the camera. And I think he and Ted had a really good rapport, and he was so comfortable with Ted. It was almost like the camera wasn't there. Randy will tell you that at some point he just stopped really paying attention. He got used to the cameras being there.
That's kind of like the hallmark of good cinema verite, for him to finally just stop caring about the camera. That's what you want.
Yeah, yeah.
Is that now? I don't know how much other documentary experience do you guys have, or with photo or video journalism. Is that common when you're working on these kind of projects? Do you usually deal with people who are either comfortable with the camera or eventually get comfortable with it, or do you have to deal with a lot of people who are nervous and self-conscious and don't like being photographed? And how do you deal with that?
It's a, it takes time. It always takes time to build rapport and also to blend in. Um, Jason and I both worked for several years in newspapers as photojournalists, and I'd say in the golden age of photojournalism, you get to spend more time. I think there was a lot more thought put into photo projects, and you would, go visit a family ahead of time, get to know them, and then you would spend more than a day photographing them, and so you had time for this relationship to develop and for you to figure out what was important in this family's life, and so you could more capture that in real time. But I think as newspapers came up with less time and resources for the staff, less the photojournalist has less time to tell a story, and so it's a little more forced. It's probably more uncomfortable. It's more superficial, and I think just tougher to tell stories in any way that has impact.
Right. I've heard that like magazines, probably not so much newspapers, but like magazine, when they would send a journalist out to cover something or do an interview, I've heard that some of those old interviews in Playboy magazine back in like the 70s or something, the journalist would go out and interview the person 3 or 4 times over the course of a couple months before they went and wrote the article. And nowadays everything's so bang, 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 and like you said, you don't have the time or the resources for that kind of thing. It's probably very hard to get that kind of in-depth coverage and comfort with, and the news suffers because the people don't get as comfortable, so you don't get the kind of candidness and deep information.
And you don't get the privilege of watching things change and watching characters change.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what makes a film powerful. And we didn't see that much change in Randy's life during the time we filmed, but we did see the rhythms of his daily life in a way that we could share that sort of intimately with the viewer and give someone who's never set foot on a farm a really, really good idea of what it feels like to live that life. And
right.
I think that's what
filmmakers you guys shot?
What's that?
What was the span of time of filming for that?
Very sporadically over 3 years, 3 or 4 years. Maybe. I think we had 18 shoot days across 3.5 years, something like that. So, it wasn't by no means every day. It was just sort of seasonal.
Yeah, I just noticed like his beard would be different from his scene, and the hair would, like, he gets a haircut, and then the next scene is like, it's, he's got the long braid again. Like, man, that guy just grows hair like nobody's business. But, I was trying to figure out the chronology of events as I was watching the film, and so now 3 years, it makes a lot of sense. Because remember, when he gets his haircut, he does say that's like 3 years of hard work right there.
Right.
Was that something that happened at the end of the shoot? Like he had been that 3 years he was talking about had been over the course of your shoot, or was that just something that happened in the middle of it?
That would have been too convenient. No, that happened I think in December of 2013, he cut his hair, which pretty much puts it right smack in the middle of our shooting as far as the final footage that ended up in the film. And at one point we were trying to edit around that, and actually that haircut scene got cut from the version that we the Last Barn Dance was just on Real South, which was a new TV show on UNC TV, and they had us cut a 26-minute version, and that scene actually didn't make that version.
Oh, okay. So I'm curious. You guys covered him. Ted, you after establishing a relationship with Randy and deciding that you want to cover him a little bit, you guys go and you cover his life over the course of about 3 years, and I guess you'd say your third act, where he actually gets his own bottling machine. That's obviously, I assume that happened near the end of shooting, right?
Yes.
So you guys shot for 2.5 years, either with a different ending in mind or not knowing what your ending and possibly even your whole story would be. So talk a little bit about making a documentary along those lines where you, like, again, not going in with an agenda and knowing the story you want to tell, but kind of having to figure it out along the way.
Yeah, you don't know what's gonna happen to end your film, and it's basically what's happening in Randy's life, and so you don't know the answer. I think that the film kind of has to be on some sort of a timeline. I didn't want to shoot this film for much longer than we did. I do remember I was up in New York doing a freelance video job, and John Casby, our editor, who did a fair amount of shooting, especially towards the end. He was sick. The weather was bad. I knew Randy was going to be trying to bottle milk for the first time, and I just treated it as if it, could become an ending. I certainly felt like it was an important moment, whether it worked or didn't work. This stuff seems a little bit trivial maybe to most people, but to Randy it was extremely important.
It was possibly, him going out of business or not.
Right. He put a lot of stock in this, and a lot is riding on whether he can sort of take control over his production. But John understood that, and I remember talking to John each of a couple of nights. I think the first night there was no resolution because there was a lot of struggle there. And as I said, John was sick, but he still went back the next day and shot a really long day. And 85-90% of that footage is from inside of a truck, an 18-wheeler trailer with the door shut, and it's cold, and it's not an ideal place to shoot beautiful footage. I think John did a really good job of capturing that process and the importance of that moment.
And for the record, it's a beautiful movie. You guys do have some fantastic cinematography.
Yeah, and I credit everybody who had a hand in that. Jason shot a lot. I shot a lot. John Casby shot quite a bit. We got great aerial footage from Andrew Johnson. So it was a team effort. That's what I like about the filmmaking part of things, is it really has to be a team. So much of my newspaper career, it was really felt, a little bit Lone Ranger. There's nobody else really doing that with you. But
right,
this film was a team effort.
So how do you, once you're done shooting, or at least you think you're done shooting, how do you go about figuring out the story, and what advice would you give to other people trying to make a documentary in this style when they're trying to figure out what the story is going to be?
Well, we actually Ted and I were disagreeing a little bit at the very end, and I'm glad that I listened to him, because I was so focused on getting the film done and I was like, all right, bottling's done, that's our ending. And then Ted had this idea that we could really tie up the barn dance itself. And when he found out that Randy was trying to teach someone else how to call dances, he said we should go film that last dance. So Ted and John went and filmed that, which ended up being the final scene. And I'm so glad that we were able to kind of tie that up. But as far as advice to people, I think the best advice I can give is just to be very organized throughout the process and take notes. Someone gave me that advice, and we, Ted and I would get together and talk about scenes, but every day that we would shoot, download the footage, organize it, have a system, Ted would actually pull selects of that day of shooting, and that turned out to be really great until we stopped using Final Cut 3.5 years later and had to change the whole film over to Premiere. So maybe that's some more advice, is to pick one editing suite and stick to it. One that you love and want to live with for several years. But
not Final Cut.
And pull selects as you go, you're so far ahead of the battle.
So you guys were editing along the way, sort of.
I just want to say that the ending, going with that advice was definitely the best call, because the thing I kept getting from when watching the documentary was, here's this old way of life. It's kind of under threat of just totally disappearing as the world keeps changing. And one of the shots that kind of grabbed me were the kids practicing wagon wheel outside.
Right.
It's like, and bluegrass is kind of getting this, resurgence. We have that bluegrass festival every year, and it's, it's kind of getting a new life. And then at the end, he's worried about these barn dances going away, but he's training somebody new. It kind of just gave a hope that these old ways will continue, and I like that. I thought that was a really great way to just definitely tie it up and make it work.
No, I agree. That was good. Did you guys run into any any copyright issues, particularly with that song, or the fact that it was just some people, quote unquote, covering it, gave you a little more flexibility?
Hopefully that falls under derivative.
Hopefully.
Pretty good derivative. Yeah, I don't think that'll be a problem, hopefully, since it was a nice little derivative and it's our recording. So I think if it had been playing in the background, it would have been a big problem.
Right. And even like the when you were actually showing scenes from the barn dance, it wasn't like you showed entire songs being played. It was just a few snippets here and there.
Exactly. And even that we would have been covered, but it's funny you mentioned that because the band didn't want to sign a release only because a materials release, because he said the front man of the band, who is one of my favorite characters in the whole movie, his name is Roland, the guy with the goatee. He said he couldn't, in good faith, sign the release because it said all the songs were original. And they do a lot of, old-time string music songs that are classics, basically. And the honest truth is it doesn't matter if it's an original. It just matters if it's an original version or recording. And so I had to kind of explain that to him. Like, as long as it's your take on the song and you're performing it, as long as you're not doing karaoke, we're good.
Right.
And, but he still was really wary about it, and so we kind of made a little compromise in the fine print to make him feel good about it.
Conrad is very familiar with the whole music issue and dealing with bands.
Yeah, speaking of the music, I thought it was really cool that you guys had Ari Picker do the score for it. I hate that Lost in the Trees is gone, but that guy's a hell of a musician, and that score was just freaking great.
Yeah, he really nailed it. We our editor actually pulled temp music that was really good in some places, and we had a really good base of music for Ari. Some composers don't want to hear anything. They want to hear the film with ambient sound, and that's it. And they want their vision. That he was comfortable trying to basically take the songs we had in there and interpret them his own way. And so that's how that process worked, which was really awesome because we were all on the same page going in, and he was able to pick the right instrument palette because the songs, like the stock music we had used was all over the place. All kind of instruments, piano, horns, guitar, banjo, this, that, whatever, vocals. So it was really cool that we were able to get him to do it for sure. It was awesome to work with him.
Right. It was really great. Sorry, I was going to say it really set the mood for a lot of those scenes.
Yeah.
And it's hard. I think the music really helped slow Randy down. He's just, the life on the farm is very slow and sort of monotonous. But if you hang out with Randy for a while, it just seems so exciting and fun. So we're trying to bridge that gap a little bit.
Okay, I had wanted to ask you about some of those extra scenes, the life on the farm, the little side jags in there, and again in the vein of trying to shed a little insight on your process and maybe give our viewers something they can learn from. I was wondering if I could mention a couple of these different little side stories you guys had, and if you would kind of share why you decided to include it, what you thought it added to the movie and everything, and how you decided to fit it in there. And I was also particularly interested in how you decided how long to make those scenes. Like I said, I mentioned earlier the one with the cow getting his head stuck in the fence. That's maybe 10 or 15 seconds. But then the house blessing has got to be 2 or 3 minutes long. So just kind of a lot of your decision-making process in including those and how to fit them in there.
Yeah.
I guess the cow with its head stuck in the fence would be a good one to start with. What was your point in putting that one in there?
Well, I wish John Casby were here because we really turned the reins over to him for editing. He rode his bicycle over to my house. I live in Chapel Hill. He was in Carborough, I think every day for 3 months or so. Just about every day he'd ride over here and set up shop in my dining room and just cut on this thing. And I watched over his shoulder from a distance and just, I knew he was spending a lot of time with it and he was doing good things. We weighed in a little bit on some things later on, but he really made a really good first cut of the film, and we didn't really have a whole lot of changes. I probably can't remember all of them, but it was all his call, just how long to linger on a scene and when to transition out, and which scenes to skip entirely. Jason?
Yeah, it's cool because I was, he was editing in Ted's house, and by the time I came in to get in the nitty-gritty of editing with John, I was able to ask him these same questions they're asking us, and I do think the logic there was that it's sort of a little scene montage. It's a little scene of one-liners where you're just getting to know Randy. It's good light. John's close to him with the camera. He shot that scene, trying to show Randy's sense of humor, but also establish how much he cares for the cows. That was the point of that scene, to show Randy's physical connection to the farm, and let Randy have a chance to be a little bit funny in the process. We did. I remember watching one edit and saying, "Does Randy just come off like a crazy cow guy?" And then we watched the whole beginning again and said, yeah, he looks like a crazy cow guy. Let's put the hair cutting scene in, or let's move this scene around, which is why the hair cutting scene got moved up a little bit, just because it does take you off the farm. It's one of the only scenes that takes you off the farm, other than the cow blessing.
Okay, the cow. I'm sorry. Well, we'll get to the cow blessing scene, but the hair cutting scene was going to be another one. So thanks for explaining that one too.
That one also establishes Randy's wife in the hair cutting scene with the mistletoe. So just another little detail of why it's where it is.
Right. No, it was nice, and like you said, it was it got you off the farm. It kind of showed you some other people in the community, showed him interacting with a lot of folks. I like that one too.
He doesn't have any kids of his own, so getting off the farm, I think it's good to see the community in different generations. And you see the kids at the dance, but you also see those kids early on at the haircut scene at the community center.
Right. So the next scene that I wanted to ask you about was probably the most startling one for me, and that was the killing scene, the one where he had to put the cow down. I'm curious what went on in putting that one in.
I was out there that day. I shot that scene, and I think I had been out there the day before, and Randy had mentioned this, and so I made plans to go back out there. Jason may have been traveling. I can't remember, but there was a reason he couldn't come out. So I was a little bit nervous about trying to cover that day by myself, but I was able to just basically follow it in real time. I did ask Randy where he would be doing this at the beginning of the day, and I did set a second angle out and basically just tripped off, just hit record on that camera and did a handheld camera close to him. And it worked out well because it gave us a way to sort of cut away from that scene at the moment when it might not have been
Just that
appropriate.
half
for us.
second,
Yeah. Yeah. And there was a lot of discussion about whether we should keep that scene in the movie. And I always argued that it should be in there because it comes right before, I think, the most, I guess, the moment in the film, for me anyway, that I feel the story the most. He redeems himself very quickly. Not that he needs to redeem himself, but I think in the general public's eye, it's kind of unsettling to see that happen. Something that happens all the time on farms, but it's not something that we all see very often, and if at all. And he redeems that very, very much immediately right after that. Just in giving a broader philosophy about his respect for this animal and his respect for life, and it puts it in perspective and makes it, I think, a stronger scene.
I think it came through. Personally, I had a harder time watching that scene, but it is, like you said, it's part of farming. It's there is death on a farm. It's unavoidable, and but you could definitely see the pain he's dealing with as he's handling it.
Right. He was not being cold, or he did not look like he was having any fun doing it. It definitely came across that it was a hard thing for him to do too.
Yeah.
Just speaking of scenes and editing, I think it was less of an issue for us of if that scene was going to be in the film, because I think we were all in agreement that it would be. It was kind of how gory it would be, but bigger than, and we settled that pretty quick. But when we were editing that scene, it was a lot of a question about how much context do we give about why this is happening, how he feels about it. It's really hard to leave some of that stuff in the editing room floor. The story of how the cow broke its leg and how Randy felt very responsible and basically put all the blame on himself, saying that it was bad management of the farm, the reason that it happened. He's really beating himself up about it, taking full responsibility. And in the end, in the film, all he says is a cow broke its leg, we have to put her down. And in so many ways, that's really all the viewer needs to know, but leaving all that backstory on the cutting room floor, it's hard, it's not fun, but, I think it makes people, it makes it move so much faster, and you're just watching and not trying to listen to the backstory. And that's what John, our editor, did really well, is cut the film in a way that you got just enough information to know what's going on in a scene, and then just watch it unfold.
Right. Well, and for me, the point of that scene, and correct me if this is what you were going for or not, but that was another one of those scenes, like early on there's Randy with the newborn calf, and then there's a cow with his head stuck in the fence, and the shooting scene, like those, to me, came across as, this is life on the farm. This is the reality of what this stuff is like. And I think if you had left that other stuff in there, the explanation for how the cow broke its leg and why it was Randy's fault, that might end up giving people the impression, okay, this was a one-off thing. It was a crazy accident that hopefully will never happen again. Right. But the reality is, an animal breaks its leg, this is what happens. And by not including all that extra context, it makes it, again, it doesn't make him look like he's enjoying it or he's being cold about it, but it's just another thing that he deals with on a regular basis. And I thought that probably made it even more powerful.
And it's a nod to just the cycle of life on the farm, and Randy deals with death almost every day. I was out there on Christmas with him, helping him feed the baby cows on Christmas. My family was in town, and we were close by, and I went by there, and there was a calf that had passed away the day before, and it was just too wet and too cold, and didn't make it. And that's just part of that. Yeah, like you said, life and death, and him dealing with loss. And it was kind of a parallel, to possibly having to deal with the loss of his farm if things don't go well.
Right. Now you follow up the killing scene with the Hindu house blessing scene, which we've mentioned a couple times, and hopefully people will get a chance to see the documentary. If it's showing in a festival near you, I definitely recommend everybody check it out. And if not, hopefully it'll be available online or on TV or in some format soon that people can check out. But real quickly, explain to everybody what that scene's about. Maybe give it a little context for how it happened and how you guys got involved shooting it. And I guess tie it in a little bit to that shooting scene, how you balance those out, how you decided to follow one right up with the other. That's a lot.
I can give a little background how he came across that scene in the Morrisville Cary area, and there's a lot of families from India that are moving there, have moved there for the last several years, and the request came through the realtor that they were looking for someone who had a cow who could bless a home for a family who's just moving into a new home. And everybody's still there?
I can still hear you. Yeah, you can keep talking.
Okay.
I don't know
and
if...
so, I found out... Randy told me about this about a day before, and so this is the time I was able to get Jason and said, this is a day that we need to have all hands on deck, and we followed Randy over to Morrisville and filmed this scene. And I was hoping this would happen several times. It never happened again. I thought it would be really interesting if it became sort of part of his financial structure, his financial framework, because it's very interesting. I had entertained the idea maybe having a parallel narrative between, these families from India who are trying to hold on to their traditions at the same time that Randy's trying to hold on to his tradition. Weird intersection of these two cultures, they can solve that problem for each other with these home blessings. But, that's just, me in my mind thinking that something's going to play out the way that I think it can, and it doesn't. I mean, it didn't happen again, but it was an interesting one-off scene and pretty humorous in the edit and pretty fun to shoot. I remember filming that just thinking, wow, this is a real convergence of people that would never happen, any other way. And it's all because there's a cow here that they think highly of the cow. Randy thinks highly of the cow, and this is not a place that I've ever seen a cow before. So it's pretty fun.
No, it was an unexpected scene and a very humorous one.
Yeah, it was just as funny in real life, that's for sure. Everyone was, you kind of see the construction guys, and yeah, it was everyone that was there knew they were witnessing something very interesting and special. As far as that scene in the film, I'm with Ted. At one point we thought that could be the whole movie. It's just if he really was transitioning to doing this, because we did find it so interesting that Randy, he thinks so highly of the cows. He says they're his best friends. He says he talks to them. They all have names. If you see him on the farm, he has a really good relationship with the cows. And I was really worried after we shot that scene, if it is a one-off scene, how does it make it in the film? How do you get into that? And so the next time I went out there, I sort of prompted him a little bit to talk about it, and he just on the fly said that line, there's something awful peaceful about a cow. Maybe the Hindus have the right idea by worshiping the cow. And when he said that...
Serendipitous.
Yeah. It was the perfect lead into that scene, and anyone that's ever edited a film or directed a film, a documentary, knows that it's really all about transitions, making a film work. The reader, the viewer kind of trusts you in the beginning, and then if you don't seamlessly take them to the next scene and give them a reason to keep watching, they're just going to stop watching or become disinterested. And finding those transition moments and then building around that, that's the key to our edit, at least.
Right. Well, and like you said, with the shooting scene, it's a tough scene for people to watch. Possibly morally, certainly emotionally, and fortunately, you had something a lot more lighthearted that you could move into to kind of bring people out of their funk, I guess would be one way to put it. And also show a little bit of the diversity and show a little more of Randy's lighter side. And that's like you said, that's what good filmmaking is about, and especially in the case of a documentary, is being able to know how to fluidly jump from one subject to the other without losing your audience.
Yeah, we do that in our lives all the time. It's just seeing the range of emotion that we can fit into a day or an hour, or the film mimics what we go through in our own lives, I think.
Right.
You don't want to stay in those low moments very long, and so we're always looking for that diversion. And,
always looking for the next juice.
Yes.
Well, that's really cool, and like I said, or if I haven't said it, I've meant to several times. It was a really fantastic little documentary. I gotta. Were there any other questions that you had, Conrad, specifically about their process?
I was interested in how working with Trailblazer was for you guys.
Yeah, Trailblazer, a local studio here in Raleigh.
Yeah.
I'll say I was mainly working with them. Trying to think how we first got in touch with them, but it was because we were part of a Southern Documentary Fund fundraiser that was held at Trailblazer, and honestly, we it's kind of known for being really great, especially for sound, and I think Ted and I agreed we wanted to have someone local, Post House, do it, and they were obviously really great, but we didn't know if we could afford it. But when we did our Indiegogo, we were able to raise enough money, which turned out to be Indiegogo turned out to be a way to raise money, but also just really get some good awareness for the film. But especially, I think when we saw it on TV, Ted and I didn't talk about it, but when I saw the film on television and it looked perfect, it looked and sounded the way I really wanted it to, I really, at that moment, more than any other moment, was glad that we got a super professional Post House. There were moments with workflow and credits and, there's some technical stuff when they change it over and do a different system, that you think, we could have just done it lower budget, done it ourselves or this or that. But seeing it on TV and seeing it presented really perfectly the way we wanted it to be seen, for me, it pays off, and seeing it on a big screen too, and, just knowing that professionals, that's all they do all day, spent time on the color and the sound. It's a sense of ease for me knowing that the right people looked at the right parts of the final version of the film. It was worth it for sure.
Right. Not knowing how much he spent, I mean, as an audience member, I would say it was definitely money well spent. It was very professional looking.
It looked good. Also, I noticed a lot of drone shots in the documentary. And when I was doing some Googling on you earlier, I saw you did a talk back in July about drones. So, would you like to talk more about like how you incorporated drones into the documentary shoot? Because that's something you don't see too often these days.
Yeah, and that came about in a pretty organic way because the first cut of the film that we screened in a theater for a rough cut audience at the Center for Documentary Studies and SDF sponsored Fresh Docs at the Full Frame Theater, where they bring in people to critique a rough cut. And one of the suggestions that we heard was that there was not quite enough sense of place. And I actually realized I hadn't seen the whole farm. It's very big, and there were parts of it, we just never had any reason to walk down to that side of the farm or drive around the other farms around Randy. And And right about that time, I'd been using a drone, and Andrew Johnson that shot all our aerial footage is just a drone whiz. And I asked him if he would want to go out with John and shoot that footage. And, when John started putting it in the film, he's like, man, some of this stuff really works well. I want to replace some of the other shots. So we used it for scene setters and then used it to replace some of the more shaky just scene setters that we had. But we did want to always use it with restraint. I think with a gimmick sort of like that, it can be something that you can pretty easily overdo. But we did genuinely feel that we needed a better sense of place of the farm, and it's so beautiful to see it from above that I'm really happy that it worked out for us. If we had finished this film 2 years ago, I don't think that really would have been an option. So
the tracking shots that you did with it were just really cool.
Yeah.
Especially that opening one where there's like the fog and everything around. That's just beautiful. I love that shot.
I'll tell Andrew for sure. He was born to fly that drone, he says.
Well, that's really cool. I thought it was a great documentary, guys. I think you did some really amazing work. Are there any last minute tips or advice you would give to other people who want to who have a topic they're interested in, who might want to make a documentary?
I'd say don't overthink it. I mean, there are a lot of moving parts, and you can kind of get paralyzed if you try to think about everything that you need to manage as a filmmaker. I went into this thing really not having a system so much as just a connection with the subject. Have a subject that you care about, and then it has some vibrancy, right, to itself. And give yourself time, spend time, and watch some things unfold, and then build a talented team around you that can support you. When you run out of energy, you run out of ideas, you can let the others take over and then be rejuvenated by what they're doing, and then you can jump back in. That's my advice.
Yeah, just what Ted said. I mean, for me, the team aspect is so important. I mean, throughout the process of making a documentary, at least the two that I've made, there are times that I kind of felt like maybe giving up, or this is never going to get done, or this isn't going to be good. And having someone else, even if it's just one other person, I think that's just the key for me, is having a good team. And when you're excited about something, it's contagious, and you can really push someone further. And even just physically on the barn dance days, Ted stayed all night out on the farm with Randy, and I didn't show up till like 3 o'clock the next day, ready to shoot. And I think by all exhausted, but having that extra second wind really helped. And then that same process kind of happened in post as well. Ted did the first half of the edit with John, then I did a lot of the edit with John, and I think get good audio and be patient.
Always a good audio. That was something Bob and I were talking about. You got this one scene in there where Randy is talking, but I guess he just had the camera mic at the time, and it's hard to hear him because he got this cow in the back. Just loud whooping the entire time. It just goes and goes and goes.
Whooping and flopping into a cement basin just as loud as possible in a big reverberating room.
Yeah, I remember asking our editor about that because it's funny, but what he's saying is really important too. So it's almost a win-win, because either you're listening to Randy and getting this really important line about the milk industry, or you're laughing because he's trying to talk over this cow pooping, and really either one of those is fine for the narrative of the film. But yeah, that's a good example. I mean, we had a lot, since we were one-man banding it a lot, there were a lot of days where we didn't have anyone mainly paying attention to sound. And it's tough. A lot of good quotes can make the cutting room floor. If you can't hear them, they never happened.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
guys,
this was your this was your second documentary. I was wondering what lessons you might have learned on your Kenyan soccer documentary Without a Fight that applied to The Last Barn Dance.
Oh, definitely a lot. I would say the biggest thing was organizing the edit, and just being ruthless with the edit, and labeling everything properly, file management, file organization, and it's something that's so easy to overlook when you're excited after a day of shooting or excited about an edit that you made, and let's just call this rough cut 2 and throw it in this bin no one could ever find. I was pretty organized with the Without a Fight, and then it just fell apart at a certain point. But my thinking with Last Barn Dance all along, at one point we had 4 people editing on the film.
Wow.
At once?
Yeah. And so we knew that if one person did a different file naming convention, the whole thing falls apart. So we just had to be so militant about it, and it was a cool way to do it because it was a very collaborative process. It was one night where Ted and Andrew and I were all editing in a row, literally on 3 machines editing. So I think that was the biggest thing that I learned, and also just to not ever hold on to anything just because we knew what went into it. There were some scenes that John put in the film, I think, just because we put a lot of time and energy into shooting them, and then when I came in and looked at it, just like, nah, that's not working. Let's get rid of it.
Kill your babies.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And having the rough cut screenings is a really good piece of advice too. I think people are a little bit hesitant to open themselves up to that sort of, to make yourself vulnerable and have your friends and colleagues come in and critique work, but it's absolutely pivotal. We did that with Without a Fight, and it made all the difference. And I think a lot of the little decisions with Last Barn Dance, it reaffirmed a lot of things, which can be just as helpful as negative feedback. But
yeah, I've heard a lot of people that saw the rough cut screening who've seen where it is now and just comment on how far it came between the rough cut and the final, and that's because of the process itself.
Right, and it's worth mentioning that positive feedback is just important as negative feedback. It's not just about showing it to people and having them tell you what's wrong with it. Getting people to repeatedly point at the same thing and say, that's really good, or that's really funny, or that really moved me, that's just as essential.
Yeah.
And the humor thing is a good example because we knew the scenes were funny to us, but we wanted to watch the audience and see when people laughed, when is it funny, just so we knew whether or not it was getting across what we wanted to get across. So it's a great example. The humor thing, you never know until you show it to an audience on a screen.
Right. Cool. So the film is out now on the festival circuit, and you guys are actually taking Randy around with you. Talk a little bit about touring and what some of your upcoming festivals are.
So we have, I'll throw some dates out. The Montana Big Sky Film Festival is next month. Our screening is actually February 21st. But before that, we have a screening in North Carolina on February 12th at the Feast Down East, which is a food festival that's featuring the film, and Randy and Ted will be there for that. And we have a screening in Raleigh, which I believe is a free screening during Agriculture Week, and that's March 15th at the Jim Hunt Library.
Okay.
Okay, cool.
And we recently handed the film over to a distributor in New York called Film Buff, and so they're going to be handling all of our video on demand and hopefully some online distribution type stuff. So we think this year the film will be very generally available, and we'll post all that on the Facebook and Twitter. It's just Last Barn Dance for Facebook and Twitter. And we did have a few select DVDs available that we mailed out, and we could theoretically do another run of those this year too. But our goal is just to make sure anyone that wants to see the film can see it. It'll be probably re-airing on UNC TV as well this year on Real South, the TV show. And that schedule is on their website. It's REEL South, Reel, like a film reel.
Oh, that's clever. I like that.
So that's the whole plug, but the idea really is that people can find the film if they want to watch it. So, and you can also host screenings through our website. We have like a screening packet and everything if people think they may have a few friends or a community group that might be interested.
Yeah. Well, congrats on getting it out there. And from what I've seen, because I was there at the Carborough Film Festival, it looks like it's getting a really great response.
Cool. Well, thank you for having us. This has been really fun.
Absolutely. So what are you guys working on next, and where can people find more of your work? Or just find you on social media?
Yep.
My website's tedrichardsonmedia.com. I just do a lot of freelance video and photography in the area, and I don't have an idea for the next film, but I expect we'll be doing another one at some point.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think kind of big name filmmakers, they put a film out and then they'll talk about their next film. I kind of feel more like this is like what it would be like to give birth and then ask someone holding their newborn when you're going to have your next baby. But Ted and I both do freelance videography and photography, and we love traveling, and we talk about stories all the time and ideas. And, I think one thing this process has taught us both is be very cautious about what you kind of dive into and make sure it's something you want to live with for a few years and really care about. And there's no shortage of things that Ted and I care about for sure. But I think it's an exciting time for documentary film in that it's so accessible, and Ted and I have pretty much dedicated our lives to telling these stories that matter to us, and I'm excited to see what we get into next myself. So
awesome. Well, that's great. Well, thank you guys both for being on the show.
Yeah, and thanks for doing the show. It's very cool.
Oh, no problem. It's that's what we're here for. You're trying to come out there. We're trying to help promote it too.
Awesome.
Thanks a lot.
Everyone watching should subscribe.
Yes, I just subscribed myself.
Yes, everybody subscribe to the YouTube channel, the Local Film Talk YouTube channel. You can follow us on Twitter at Local Film Talk. You can always find our stuff on trianglelife.tv, and of course the podcast is available on iTunes. So that's the plug for the show. Conrad, what we got coming up? Any Triangle Film Community stuff coming up this week? Or anytime in the near future?
But very soon, February 5th, at the Cary Theater, we are doing an encore screening of the Best of Film Spark 2015. We got 8 short films, all by local filmmakers. This will be up on the big screen. We'll have a Q&A afterwards, and maybe if everyone's up for it, we'll go next door and grab a drink afterwards so people can meet the filmmakers, get to know them a little better.
I think I could be up for drinking. I mean, I can't get through a show without drinking, so I think I can go get a beer after a screening. Definitely. And we're going to try to, there's the Unexposed, the experimental filmmaker guys. They're going to be doing a screening over in Cary soon, aren't they?
That's in March.
Sometime in March.
17th, 2 days after the Hunt Library for you guys.
Oh.
There we go.
And,
so lots of cool stuff happening in the area. It's a good time to be in indie cinema.
Yes, it is.
I agree.
Well, cool. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, Conrad, as always, for helping co-host the show. And thank you to everybody watching, either live or listening and watching later on. This has been another episode of Local Film Talk. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.